A Big 12 football star, a guy who could have been the face of his team next season, maybe the face of the conference, is no longer on his team due to sexual assault allegations. This is bad. And this is a Locked On Big 12 Locked On Cougars. That's BYU crossover.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And it is Tuesday, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Big 12, Locked On Cougars crossover. Drake Toll with you from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Jake Hatch of Locked On Cougars, thank you for making our shows your first listen every single day. We will start with Parker Kingston. The BYU football team rocked by scandal once again this offseason, and in a similar vein to what happened to Jake Retzlaff and the Cougars this time last year. Then, Richie Saunders, torn ACL, out for the season. And finally, we'll end the show with, these are two major storylines in the Big 12. They both happen to the same team in 72 hours. Where does BYU go from here in both football and men's basketball? If you hit subscribe, we get to keep our jobs. Again, thank you for making these shows your first listen every single day. Oh, Jake, ma'am, what would you pay to go back to like last Wednesday? Just put it in reverse.
Quite a bit.
Yeah. Let's start with the Parker Kingston story, and let's start like over a year ago. You know, this is something that BYU has said it did not learn about until very recently. When does this whole thing actually start?
So the allegations allegedly happened February 23rd of 2025. So going back nearly a year ago, that's when this alleged incident took place down in St. George, Utah, which is about 3 hours south of Provo. And Drake, honestly, came seemingly out of left field. And that's the crazy thing about this, because I can tell you, when the Jake Retzlaff stuff dropped last May, in fact, that felt like it came out of left field. But for the second straight offseason, BYU football, as you mentioned, rocked by scandal, rocked by a major piece. In this case, Parker Kingston's already out of school. He's already been kicked off the football team. He is gone. So, yeah, the football program, not in a good way right now, understandably so.
This seems to have parallels, obviously, to the Retzlaff situation, but where I don't draw parallels, that's the most alarming piece. The first one being Retzlaff was still on the team, like had the option to remain on the team and be suspended and take his lumps that way. Why was this handled differently? Well, why is Parker Kingston immediately off the roster from what you're hearing?
So this one is a criminal case. The other one, while it did involve allegations of sexual assault, it was a lawsuit. It was not a criminal legal matter. It had already been looked at by the Provo police. They had passed on filing charges. This one, there's first-degree felony charges associated with it, and I can tell you that's a hard and fast no thank you from BYU to obviously put up with that. And it's unfortunate because Parker Kingston was on his way. He had a 1,000-yard season this past year. It was looking like he was going to be one of, if not the face of the BYU wide receiving core next year, alongside some really top talent like Bear Bachmeier and LJ Martin on BYU's offense. It's a gut punch for this football program because he was a guy who looked like he was ready to take yet another step in his football career. And criminal charges, that's just something that BYU will not tolerate. And they obviously shoved him off and said, hey, you're gone.
I mean, this is huge for the Big 12 because you lose one of the best receivers in the conference, not just last year. He was very underrated in the Big 12, and he would have been maybe the best going into next season. But as big of a storyline as it is for the Big 12, it's shocking for BYU to go through the same thing. Feel like you're going through the same thing, but amplified, worse. And Jake, I don't want to speak for you, but I think you would echo similar sentiments. In a situation like this, my thoughts, my prayers are with everyone involved. The victim coming first, the alleged victim coming first here. And that display of love is the same thing I said about the Jake Retzlaff case. And you know what? The alleged victim there, whether she was ultimately lying or misconstrued or whatever it was, she deserves your thoughts and love too. That's at least what I believe. That's what I subscribe to. And so my thoughts are with those who are involved in this case, and it seems much different. My thoughts are with Parker Kingston's fiance or ex-fiance that was announced publicly a week before this news dropped. Jake, so many storylines to go with in this one, but let's talk about the abruptness that you just mentioned. You know, again, he announced his engagement at a BYU basketball game. This just didn't seem like the guy. I mean, is Retzlaff, in that same vein, has Parker Kingston had a series of off the field issues where you say, you know what, that guy had secrets or nuggets leading up to this?
No, none of that. Here's the thing, Parker. The one thing I knew about him is he liked to golf. That's what I knew about him, Drake. He's a scratch golfer for all intents and purposes. Best golfer on BYU's football program. I had no notion whatsoever this is a guy who had off the field issues, because he has always, to my knowledge before this, had kept his nose clean. And obviously in retrospect, that appears to not be the case here. And that's why I said it came so out of left field, because there was not a notion in my brain that Parker Kingston was going to be hit with felony rape charges and find himself in an inmate's uniform down there in 5th District Court and having to pay $100,000 in bail.
Is there a chance that Parker Kingston ever suits up for BYU again?
I'd be hard pressed to say he does, because I just don't know that unless it's complete exoneration. We're talking this woman recants, whatever it takes for complete exoneration of him. I just, that's the only way that I see a path back to him playing for BYU. And in fact, I'd be hard pressed to think he's going to play for another football program with this type of charge or charges being levied against him.
As we've learned in cases like these, there are rare cases the NCAA moves quickly. They moved very quickly with Jake Retzlaff. They ensured he could play for Tulane. If it is found that he's never met this person, all allegations are unequivocally physically false. Certainly that'll be a different story. But as we learned with Retzlaff, there's a lot to get through. What if it's an honor code violation? There's so many questions to ask as it pertains to BYU. Jake, before we go into Richie Saunders, man, double whammy today. This news with Parker Kingston. If you're Kalani Sitake, I mean, what do you do? Where do you go? How do you deliver this news to your team for the second consecutive year?
I think you get them in the same room and say, guys, understand that what we have here at BYU, and the reason why they have the as stringent an honor code as they have, Drake, at BYU, is to prevent stuff like this from happening. And that's got to be Kalani's message to you guys. Guys, if you follow the rules we set out for you here, guess what? None of it is going to be affecting you. And yes, there are instances where people make major mistakes. Yes, that does happen. But man, you got to understand, guys, that this is a situation for the second straight offseason. We have had one of our star players fall by the wayside because they couldn't live up to the standard we have set in this program. Stick to the standard and understand that what we're doing, we're having a lot of success. Don't screw it up.
When we return, Richie Saunders, torn ACL. What does it mean for Big 12 basketball at the top of the conference? Probably one less major contender. This is Locked On Big 12, Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by Mazda. The reason it's brought to you by Mazda is because not only is Mazda changing the game and moving the game forward, so is Texas Tech men's basketball. They're really, really good right now. And it's time to highlight what a fun story it's been to follow a team beating top 5 opponents week in and week out. It reminds us of what it takes to raise the bar. Extra effort off the court, dialing in every detail, giving it the extra fire, that grit, and I never quit. Put the same passion into every model. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. And there's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. Today's show is brought to you by Mazda. The show is also brought to you by, that's right, FanDuel. FanDuel is exactly where I'm going as we speak, as it pertains to futures, the NBA Finals. Live and in person, you can see that if you win the FanDuel NBA sweepstakes. Just use your profit boost on any NBA future. That's right, any NBA future. You go in, utilize your profit boost, and you'll be entered in a chance to win 2 tickets, all expense paid trip. That's right, you and a friend, all expense paid trip to watch the NBA Finals on FanDuel's dime. FanDuel.com to get started. Use that profit boost on an NBA future to be entered today at FanDuel. Jake Hatch of Locked On BYU Cougars. Locked On Cougs, joining the show. Drake Toll with you. Hey, you can follow us for insider exclusives. Locked On Big12.supercast.com. If you listen every single day, listen ad free. Super simple to do. If you go to Locked On, again, Locked On Big12.supercast.com. Jake, what's your link?
Yeah, lockedoncougars.supercast.com. It'll get you to the same place for either one of our fine podcasts.
Pretty simple, pretty easy for the everydayers of these shows. Thank you. All right, Jake, we go from the Parker Kingston news to, and it's terrible to lump these two together, but it's bad news for a BYU fan this weekend in completely different spheres, obviously, but Richie Saunders, torn ACL, out for the season. I'll leave it vague for you. What does this mean for BYU basketball?
What was supposed to be a team that had dreams of maybe making the first Final Four in BYU basketball history, maybe making out of the first weekend will be a darn near miracle at this point. Let's just put it that way, Drake. It is a major blow, maybe the single biggest blow outside of losing AJ DeBonsa. Losing Richie Saunders just absolutely knocks BYU down multiple pegs.
Could you argue ultimately that Saunders is the most important BYU basketball player given the way he facilitates?
Yeah, 100%. He generates extra possessions with his rebounding, his relentless energy, his overall want to, is the way I term it. That does obviously just it cannot be overstated how much of a blow this is to this basketball program. Because yes, AJ DeBonsa is a seminal talent. Rob Wright, very good in his own right. There's a number of guys on this roster that are indispensable, but maybe the most single indispensable player was Richie because he could score, he could rebound, he could facilitate. You could do everything with this kid on the court, and not having him there, man, what a major hit BYU just took.
He also bleeds blue. That's the biggest piece for me, is you're losing the heart of what BYU basketball has been for a couple of seasons now. You know, the Tater Cuts guy come the end of last year. And Jake, man, what have you heard from the Richie Saunders camp? I mean, I can only imagine this is a really tough blow for a great guy.
Yeah, no, it is. And that's the thing about this is he obviously, you mentioned he bleeds blue. This is a kid who had an opportunity to follow Mark Pope to Kentucky, made a visit to Lexington, ultimately decided his heart resided in Provo, and he wanted to stick around. You're not going to see guys at the level BYU's competing at now, speaking of the Power 4 level, that are going to be guys like him very often anymore. 4-year guys who have taken themselves from being a sixth man to the most improved player in the Big 12 to a first-team all-conference player. That's just not going to exist in this day and age of college basketball. And that's the sad part about how this story ends for Richie in terms of his BYU career, is he's taken out with about 10 games to go. And it felt like it needed to end a whole lot better than it did. And it's unfortunate because obviously he feels rotten about letting his team down. But for what he did for BYU basketball, it's just disappointing to see it have that, I don't know, lackluster. I don't know what adjective to use. That ending was not befitting of the career that Richie Saunders had with the BYU Cougars.
Yeah, you say ending, Jake. There will be some fans that are confused, namely with the way that we give out eligibility across college football and basketball now. Anybody can be eligible as long as they want. Thank you, Trinidad Chambliss, and the 9-year Montana linebacker. Is this truly it for Richie Saunders in a BYU jersey? Like, are you sure?
I guess I can't completely rule it out because you're right. Eligibility is a myth now with the NCAA. It's a very good point by you. But here's the thing. He tested the NBA waters last year, and there have been strong indications from Kevin Young and others that this was it for him in a Cougar uniform. Him and AJ were supposed to be kind of the 2 draft picks from this year's squad to kind of continue the NBA pipeline that Yegor Dielman set up last year from BYU to the NBA. And it's unfortunate because an ACL injury this time of year, that means it really puts a damper on potential being drafted. I wouldn't count Richie Saunders out of being an NBA player. I really do think his ability to compete, his ability to shoot, just his 3-point shot in particular, that's valuable stuff at the NBA level. I just think that the injury happening when it did, it may take him from what I expected to be a second-round draft pick to now he's going to have to be a two-way guy and work his way up that way.
The Dawson Baker injury, I'll go back to that. There are now 6, I think, of the original 17 BYU players that started the year who are out indefinitely, out for the season with an injury. What happened, Jake? I mean, this decimation of the roster is completely unfair. You mentioned this is Final Four hopes for this team. Is this as big of an injury slide skid as you've seen a BYU team have?
It's been a minute since I've seen one of this magnitude, especially in basketball, because this team, you're right, they had a number of injuries coming in. Nate Pickens never even saw the court, had to have season-ending knee surgery. Same with Brody Kozlowski, who never saw time on the court. Then you had the Dawson Baker injury, which he was essentially the linchpin that made that second unit really go. Losing him really put BYU essentially in a situation where their big 3, speaking of Richie Saunders, AJ DeBonsa, and Rob Wright, really had to carry a major load for this team. And then, now a guy like Richie going down. It is about as bad a rash of injuries, and we're talking like season-ending significant type injuries, as I have seen in quite some time in Provo.
So I want to get your take on what the rest of the year is going to look like for BYU, but I want to go to 2026-27, actually, next basketball season. Do you assume that Dawson Baker will be back to the litany of injuries, that each of those guys will be back in a BYU uniform, and it almost creates a perfect storm of an elite team of guys that just couldn't leave due to this?
It could, because Dawson Baker does have that door open to him, according to the coaching staff, that he could get that year back of eligibility. And you're right. Eligibility, if you want to challenge for it, essentially the NCAA is going to be like, okay, whatever, do your thing. Sure. It feels that way. But they could have a really, really fine squad next year because they're chasing kind of the next A.J. DeBonsa and Bruce Branch III. And indications are that they are one of the two favorites to land him. And if they land him, that means they have their superstar freshman to obviously build the core around. I guarantee BYU will work the transfer portal again to bring in guys. They've got a couple of high-level high school prospects from the state of Utah coming into the squad. There are makings there, Drake, of a team that could be very formidable next year if they get all these guys back together and obviously maybe make a few additions via the portal.
Jake, this year, I'm going to make a crazy statement, and I want you to qualify it. How did this happen? BYU made the Final Four despite these injuries. How would that ever come true?
It would have come true because I think that they had the star power to lead them through that.
Oh, no, Jake. Despite these injuries, I'm saying right now, this version of BYU makes the Final Four. How do they do it? Yeah, right. It sounds so foreign, but I mean, if it does happen, how did it happen?
So we just saw Jimmer Fredette get his jersey retired by BYU basketball this past weekend, the same game that Richie Saunders went down in. A.J. DeBonsa will have to morph into the supernova edition of Jimmer Fredette and maybe average 50 points a game. That would get them over the top there, Drake. That's what it would have to be, in my opinion.
I mean, he is arguably the number one player in college basketball right now. So if anybody can do it, it is A.J. DeBonsa, and I have faith that BYU does make the Final Four. He'll be right there. What are there much better odds, Jake, that BYU finishes as a 7 seed and loses in round 1 to the 10?
Yeah, it feels kind of that way. And that's the difficult part to kind of swallow and accept here if you're a BYU basketball fan, Drake, because this team had so much promise. They had never landed a guy the caliber of A.J. DeBonsa in recruiting. They bring in Rob Wright from Baylor, and obviously that had its own, unique set of circumstances, I guess probably the best way to say it. And then you add Richie, who was a first-team All-Big 12 guy, and it just looked like a team that was set to achieve things that BYU basketball fans have only dreamed of. And the sad part is that's being ripped away from them. And yeah, it very well could be this is a team that goes from Sweet 16 caliber at least to, could be an easy 10-7, 5-12, like one of those upset picks that's a very trendy pick come bracket time.
Yeah, it's Jake Hatch of Locked On Cougars coming up. Where does BYU as an athletic department, a fan base, go from here? Where is the hope? Locked On Big 12, Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by Indeed. It's where I'm going right now as we speak to make a new hire. In minutes, I can find qualified candidates for jobs with Indeed-sponsored jobs. Now, look, the last Locked On Big 12 social media intern was a BYU student. Why does this guy love BYU? He's always tweeting about BYU. I don't even check the social media accounts, man. That guy did his own thing. If you're tired of all the BYU love, or if you like that, then apply. Indeed-sponsored jobs. In the minute I've been talking to you, 27 new hires on Indeed, according to the Indeed data worldwide. And if you just go in there as a listener of this podcast, you can get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves. Indeed.com/podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Jake Hatch of Locked On Cougars. BYU fans are staring into a deep, dark, terrible abyss. The universe has collapsed upon them. In a 72-hour span, you lost a star basketball player to a torn ACL and a star football player, all Big 12 caliber wide receiver, to sexual assault allegations that have kicked him off of the team. Those two things completely unrelated. Terrible for a BYU fan who just loves their sports. When will the sun come up again? Where is the hope to be had?
Well, not to add more fuel to that pity party there, Drake, but we also did lose the matriarch of modern BYU football in Patty Edwards this past weekend as well. Lavelle Edwards' widow. I just wanted to make sure to express my thoughts and prayers go out to the Edwards family at this time, because I'm telling you, Patty, salt of the earth, like maybe the most unsung hero in BYU sports in many, many generations. She meant so much to the BYU football program and did it all behind the scenes for all intents and purposes. Let's just put it this way. Patty Edwards may be one of the chief reasons why Kalani Sitake is still the head coach of BYU, Drake. That might be her final act in terms of helping BYU athletics, is keeping the guy that's got BYU football rolling in place in Kalani Sitake. They reportedly had a chat during that whole debacle of the Penn State and all that stuff. So let me get to the original question here.
Yeah.
With all that, understand that hope springs eternal, and that it may take you a week or 2 weeks or a couple of months, but there is going to be another season on the horizon for BYU football. There is still some hope that BYU basketball may scrounge a way to find their way to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament. It looks pretty bad right now, but I like to always look at the bright side of things and say, you know what? This is sports, and sports always has good stories that emerge from it. It was a really, really tough weekend for BYU sports, and I completely understand that you mentioned the abyss. Yeah, a lot of Cougar fans staring into that abyss saying, wow, what is going on here? But understand that there will be feel-good stories in time that will come on the backside of what was a really rough 72 or so hours in BYU sports history. But I believe that, yeah, we will find something positive to, coalesce around. It just may take a little bit of time.
Again, I won't compare the Retzlaff situation and Kingston situations. They're each unique to themselves, to their own victims or alleged victims. But again, you're a BYU fan. You're like, oh, we just did this. We just went through this. On the other side of that, losing your starting quarterback, you had a QB, true freshman, who became a phenom in the conference, was the talk of the Big 12, and you made it to the conference championship game in Arlington. Jake, is there that hope? Is there that reprieve? The BYU fans are saying, hey, we just went through this and it actually worked out.
Yeah, I think there is, and there should be, because their freshman class of wide receivers that are coming into this program, that are already there on campus, they enrolled early. They got some really fine talent in that room. JoJo Phillips, this is his time to step into the forefront and really show what he's capable of. There is another Nakua on the roster here, Drake. Everybody knows that Puka. Well, Tei, his younger brother, has been expected to really kind of make his imprint on the football program at some point. It opens the door to opportunity for all these younger players in that wide receiver room to say, all right, now's my time to shine. So, yeah, understand that, it's tough to lose Parker Kingston. And like I said, our thoughts and prayers go out to everybody involved in that situation. I said it on my own podcast. There are no winners in that situation. Much like there were no winners in the Jake Retzlaff situation, nobody comes out feeling good when it comes to that. But understand that BYU put together a pretty fine season in the aftermath of the Jake Retzlaff situation, and you got to have hope that they can find the answers and will find the answers to replace the production that Parker Kingston gave this football program, and you can make another run this fall.
What confidence do you have that Kalani Sitake and company during this second round of portal? Because remember, there is the Bear Bachmeier portal. That's when BYU swooped in and got its starting QB, that they will go after a high-level wide receiver one.
They will look. They'll see what's out there, obviously, and inquire about players that may come available. And that's the interesting part about this, Drake, is because they've claimed that there's no real portal window, but you and I both know that guys can leave essentially whenever they want, because we saw it with Jake Retzlaff. We've seen it with multiple other instances. If guys come available and BYU thinks that they are capable of being a key cog in a high-level offense that BYU aspires to have this season, you can guarantee they will kick the tires on anybody who comes available. They feel like fits the culture, fits what BYU is all about, and essentially kind of pitch them on the idea like, hey, we need an alpha in this room. Do you want to come and be that guy?
Given the other players who've announced their return to BYU, how much confidence do you have that this roster, namely after what was added in the transfer portal, and it wasn't a slew of players, but enough to plug holes or create competition, what is your confidence this is once again a Big 12 title contending roster?
I think they're very capable of that. Yes, losing Parker Kingston absolutely it makes a dent in those thoughts that they can make that run again. But you do have your freshman star quarterback back for his first full offseason of working out with BYU, and the expectation is the Bear will be even better than he was as a freshman. LJ Martin is the reigning offensive player of the year in the conference. If he stays healthy, BYU's running attack is going to be absolutely elite. And yeah, they reloaded on the offensive line. They have brought back essentially everybody of note on defense that had eligibility remaining. And that was a pretty darn good defense. None of those players, save one, followed Jay Hill to Michigan. And the guy who did leave suffered a season-ending knee injury as a backup linebacker. So there is a lot of confidence that this team, they're very capable of challenging for Big 12 supremacy. And in fact, I guarantee that even with Parker Kingston being gone off this roster, the message has not changed one bit inside that meeting room saying, guys, we were close to winning the Big 12 last year. We want to make the college football playoff. That remains the goal here. Understand that we've been on the doorstep the last 2 years of making the college football playoff. Let's go out and knock that door down, and we'll do it with the guys we have in this room.
BYU basketball, what are the odds? And it probably doesn't happen on February 18th against Arizona, but what are the odds? Cada, Wright, DeBonsa, those guys step up, and all of a sudden, Kevin Young, with his NBA basketball expertise, finds a way to lead this version of BYU, this ragtag group of BYU, to a Final Four caliber season altogether again.
If they do it, it will be talked about for eons to come. Let's just put it that way, because it'd be one of those epic tales. Because 6 season-ending injuries to your original roster, and maybe the single most indispensable player on your roster now down for the season in Richie Saunders. If Kevin Young can cobble together whatever he has to do with this roster to make that type of a run, yeah, it will go down as one of the finest coaching performances in BYU history. And we've seen a guy like this really show extremely well in his first year, speaking of Kevin Young, but kind of that next step here. That's what I'm looking for to see, okay, what else you got for us here? And by the way, there's opportunities on this roster. Alexei Kostic, a lot of these younger players, Moo Davis, they have the opportunity now to make up the 18 to 25 points a game, all the different contributions that Richie Saunders offered. Well, guess what? Somebody's got to give that to this roster, and those guys got to be thinking, all right, let's step up and do our thing.
45 seconds left.
Mm-hmm.
Does hope mean something just a little bit more at BYU?
It does. BYU is a special place. I've said it time and time again that this is a university that represents a worldwide faith, and the message is of hope and believing that there are brighter and better days ahead. And I think it's pervasive in everything BYU does, especially when it comes to BYU athletics.
We love it, but it's not all football and basketball out there in the world. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, every now and then, but
yeah, trust me, a lot of BYU fans, they're in it for BYU football and basketball, but the bigger BYU community, Brigham Young University, it stands for a whole lot more than just football and basketball. Yes,
they know the message. That's Jake Hatch at Jacob C. Hatch on socials. Drake Toll with you. This has been It Always Will Be. Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. A crossover with Dose Grande. With Cougars and Dose Grande.